The moment I felt my daughter's tiny fingers dig into my wrist, the noise of the airport vanished under the thundering of my own heartbeat. The overhead lights blurred, the smell of burnt coffee from a nearby kiosk mixed with the sharp cold of the terminal air. And all I could focus on was the way her whole body trembled as she stared at the man walking away from us. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal nearly destroyed you, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this have a way of finding the people who need them. I didn't know what she had sensed. Not yet. I only knew that her fear wasn't ordinary, and it hit me like a warning I couldn't afford to ignore. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I still remember the sharp glow of the overhead lights at Phoenix Sky Harbor, how they made everything feel louder, brighter, harder to process. I was standing there trying to steady myself while watching Ethan disappear toward his gate, telling myself his trip was nothing more than another routine meeting. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But even before he blended into the crowd, something inside me was already tightening, like my body sensed what my mind refused to name. What I couldn't ignore was Mia. One moment, she was quiet beside me, and the next, her little hand clamped around mine with a desperation I had never felt from her. It wasn't the usual clinginess of a tired child. It was the kind of grip that came from pure fear. She looked up at me with wide eyes, and the tremor running through her small body told me she was fighting something she didn't have words for yet. I felt it before she even opened her mouth. The unmistakable sense that my daughter was trying to protect us from something I didn't understand. I tried to shake off the unease. I told myself we were just exhausted after a long day, that I was reading too much into her silence. But the truth settled in quickly. Mia wasn't imagining anything. She was reacting to something real, something immediate. And when she hesitated to walk toward the exit, when she almost seemed afraid of the thought of going home, the last bit of denial I was clinging to slipped out of my hands. I didn't know what was waiting for us beyond that moment, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I had to listen to her. Whatever came next would start with that choice. Mia's fear didn't fade once we stepped outside the airport. If anything, it followed us like a shadow. She stayed close to me, holding my arm with that same trembling insistence, and every mile I drove toward our home in Chandler only seemed to make her smaller, quieter, more tense. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, trying to piece together what could possibly terrify a child so deeply. That's when a memory surfaced, the kind that slips in uninvited and refuses to leave. Earlier that morning, I had brushed past our bedroom door and heard Ethan on the phone. His voice had been low, urgent, the kind of tone he used when he didn't want me to hear. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, sitting behind the wheel with my daughter silently shaking, that memory felt different. It felt connected. I kept telling myself this was just childhood imagination. Kids have bad feelings sometimes. Kids get scared. But this wasn't ordinary fear. This was the kind of dread that settled into Mia's bones. And the longer I watched her fight tears she couldn't explain, the harder it became to ignore the truth rising inside me. Something was wrong, and she had sensed it before I did. So when our street finally appeared ahead of us, glowing softly under the porch lights and looking as peaceful as ever, I couldn't force myself to turn into the driveway. Instead, I kept driving past, circling to a side road that offered a hidden view of our house. I parked there with the engine off, my heart pounding in a slow, heavy rhythm. I didn't know what I expected to see, but I knew we weren't going inside. Not yet. Not until I understood what my daughter was so afraid of. From the moment I parked on that quiet side street, a heaviness settled inside me. Mia curled against her seat, still trembling, and I kept my eyes fixed on our house just a few yards away. It looked so peaceful under the porch light, the way it always did when we came home after a long day. But that calm felt false now, like a photograph placed over something rotten. As we waited, my mind drifted through memories I had pushed aside for too long. Little things Ethan had brushed off as normal marriage dynamics. The way he pressured me to put our savings in his name because it was more efficient. The way he discouraged me from returning to work, insisting he handled everything. Even the life insurance increase he said was just smart planning. At the time, none of it seemed threatening. But sitting there in the dark, with my daughter shivering beside me, those memories felt sharper, clearer, almost accusatory. I was still fighting the thought that any of this could be real when a van turned onto our street. It moved slowly, too slowly, as if searching. My breath caught when it stopped directly in front of our home. Two men stepped out, calm, deliberate, completely unhurried. They didn't glance around nervously. They didn't force anything. One of them simply reached into his pocket, pulled out a key, and unlocked my front door as if he lived there. My whole body went cold. Minutes passed before the smell hit me, a faint chemical sting carried on the breeze. Gasoline. Then came the flicker of light inside the living room, soft at first, then growing into a hungry glow. Flames began crawling up the walls I once dusted and decorated. In that moment, watching my home ignite from the safety of our car, the truth struck me with absolute clarity. If Mia hadn't stopped me, if I hadn't listened, we would have been inside. And something, or someone, wanted us gone. I stood there in the dark, holding Mia against me as firefighters drowned what remained of our home in heavy streams of water. The flames had already eaten through the rooms that once held our memories, leaving behind a hollow, blackened shell. I could barely breathe. All I could think was how easily those flames could have taken us. If Mia hadn't begged me not to go home, if I had dismissed her fear the way I sometimes dismissed my own instincts, we would have been inside when that fire started. That truth settled over me like ice. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan, written as if he were checking on us from some safe distance, pretending he believed we were already asleep. Seeing his words in that moment cracked something inside me. Any lingering hope that there was some innocent explanation simply broke. I saw every red flag with painful clarity. The secrecy, the financial control, the sudden insistence that everything stay in his name. I realized I had been explaining away warning signs for years. In the chaos, a memory of my father surfaced. He had once pressed a business card into my hand, telling me that if I ever felt unsafe, I should call Ruth Delgado without hesitation. At the time, I thought he was being overprotective. That night, I finally understood what he had sensed long before I did. Ruth opened her office door with a calmness that made my knees tremble. Once inside, she laid out the truth with a steady voice: Ethan's gambling debts, the businesses that had quietly collapsed, the inheritance he had drained behind my back, and then the final blow when the money ran out he started looking for another solution. By the time she finished, the room felt unbearably still. I knew then, without denial or doubt, that Ethan had intended to kill us. And I also knew this was only the beginning of what I had to face next. When Ruth explained what we needed to collect, it felt impossible at first. The thought of stepping back into that charred skeleton of a home made my stomach twist. But she spoke with a calm certainty, reminding me that evidence was the only way to make the truth undeniable. I looked at Mia then, at the quiet determination in his eyes, and I realized I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it for the child who had already seen too much. Still, as night settled over Chandler and we followed a back route toward what was left of the house, fear clung to me. The closer we got, the more the air smelled of wet ash and burned wood. The sight of the collapsed walls made my chest tighten. But Ruth touched my arm, steadying me, and Mia whispered that he remembered where his father hid things. I didn't want him to know such details, yet I also understood that his awareness might save us. Inside, the floors groaned under our steps. Every corner looked unfamiliar, twisted by fire, but Mia moved with surprising confidence. He led us upstairs to Ethan's home office, one of the few rooms not completely destroyed. Behind a scorched painting, I found the safe. The code was the same one Ethan used for everything. That familiarity stung. Inside were stacks of cash, a phone I had never seen, and folders stuffed with documents. Then Mia knelt, prying up a loose floorboard to reveal another hidden stash, a notebook, another phone, and an unmarked envelope. I barely had time to process the weight of what we'd found before voices echoed from below. The same men. They were back. We slipped into the office closet, holding our breath as footsteps creaked across the ruined floor. I felt Mia bury his face against me while Ruth kept her hand on the doorknob, ready for anything. A sudden scream outside pulled the men away just long enough for us to run. We didn't stop until we reached the car. Only then, gripping the evidence to my chest, did I understand how close we'd come and how much power we now held. I laid everything out on Ruth's desk, piece by piece, as if arranging the fragments of a life I no longer recognized. The cash, the phones, the folders, the notebook. Each item felt heavier than it should have, carrying a truth I wasn't prepared to face, but could no longer avoid. Ruth opened the notebook first, her expression tightening as she read through page after page of debts, deadlines, and the kind of names that made my stomach turn. And then she reached a section labeled in Ethan's handwriting, a phrase that sent a coldness through me I will never forget. Final solution. Beneath it were calculations tied to my life insurance, written with the same neat penmanship he used for grocery lists. The burner phone revealed what the notebook didn't show: message threads with a man coordinating every detail of the fire, the timing of Ethan's flight, the plan to strike while Mia and I slept, the insistence that there be no loose ends. Reading those words made something inside me harden. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I finally understood the depth of the danger we were in. Ruth reached out to Detective Samuel Ortiz, a man she trusted completely. When he arrived, he didn't sugarcoat anything. He explained that the evidence was powerful, but to ensure nothing slipped through the cracks, Ethan needed to incriminate himself in real time. Hearing that made my heart race, but I also knew he was right. So I sat there, hands trembling, and typed a message to Ethan. I asked him to meet me at Desert Willow Park the next morning. His response came almost instantly, short, direct, and exactly what we needed. He agreed. In that moment, fear and resolve collided inside me. The confrontation was coming, and there was no turning back. I reached Desert Willow Park just as the morning light settled over the grass. Soft and almost comforting. It felt wrong that the world could look so peaceful while my entire life balanced on a single meeting. I knew the officers were already there, positioned like everyday strangers. A jogger stretching near a tree, a woman pretending to read on a bench, a man sipping coffee with his hood pulled low. Their presence steadied me, even as my hands trembled. I sat near the fountain, listening to the steady rush of water as I tried to quiet the storm inside me. Confronting the man who had once been my husband, the man who had tried to erase me and my child, felt unreal. But there was no turning back. When Ethan finally appeared from behind a line of mesquite trees, I barely recognized him. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, but his eyes, sharp, frantic, were unmistakable. He walked toward me with the same practiced concern he used to show during arguments, as if he could still pull me back into the version of reality he controlled. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to shrink, to smooth things over, to keep the peace, but I didn't. I stayed still. I stayed present. As I spoke, his expression changed. The mask slipped. His voice grew tight, irritated, then desperate, and I saw it. The moment he realized he no longer had control over me. That's when panic took over. He grabbed my arm with a force that sent a shock through my body, and before I could react, I felt the cold flash of a knife pressed against my side. The officers moved instantly. A sharp crack cut through the air, knocking the knife from his hand. In seconds, he was on the ground, restrained, shouting threats that no longer held power. I stepped back, shaking, as relief flooded through me. For the first time since that night at the airport, I let myself breathe. This was the moment everything shifted. The moment I finally stepped out of his shadow and into my own safety. In the months after Ethan's arrest, life felt strangely quiet, as if the world had paused to let Mia and me relearn how to breathe. And over the years that followed, that quiet slowly transformed into something steadier, something that felt like peace. We settled into a modest home in Mesa. Nothing extravagant, but warm in the ways that mattered. For the first time in a long time, I woke up without bracing for impact. Mia grew into a steadier, braver version of himself. Therapy became a place where he learned to untangle fear from instinct, and watching him rediscover joy, real, unguarded joy, felt like witnessing sunlight return after a long storm. He talks now about wanting to study architecture, to build spaces that make people feel safe. I still catch my breath when I hear that. There's something healing in the way children reshape the world after it tries to break them. As for me, I went back to school. I finished the degree I abandoned years ago and found my way into advocacy work, helping women who feel trapped, confused, or unheard. It's not easy work, but it feels honest. It feels like closing a door that once nearly closed on me. Forgiveness is complicated. I don't force it. I don't rush it. Some days I feel a soft distance from the past. Other days, the memories return with sharp edges. But I no longer let them define me. What guides me now is intuition. The same voice I nearly ignored that night at the airport. If there is one message I hope stays with you, it's this. Trust the feeling that tells you something isn't right. It might save your life. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've lived through something that changed you, or if you're still finding your way through it, I hope you'll share your experience in the comments. I read every one.